He thought he had power. He thought his badge made him untouchable. But when he pulled his gun on the wrong woman, the world made him pay. The automatic doors slide open with a faint whoosh, letting in a burst of cold evening air as Lieutenant General Regina Hayes steps inside. The small convenience store is quiet, save for the low chatter of a few customers and the faint hum of a refrigerator in the back. She moves with the kind of presence that doesn't need an introduction, shoulders squared, gaze steady, steps deliberate. Her deep green Army service uniform is pristine, adorned with medals and ribbons that speak to a lifetime of service, sacrifice, and leadership. The silver stars on her shoulders gleam under the harsh fluorescent lights. But she isn't here to be noticed. She just wants to grab a bottle of water and a protein bar before heading home behind the counter. A young cashier watches her, eyes flicking between admiration and curiosity. The other customers don't seem to pay her much attention, except for one. Officer Brad Simmons, standing near the refrigerated drink section, grips an energy drink tightly in his hand. His eyes follow Regina's every movement, his jaw set. To him, she's not a decorated army general. She's a tall black woman in uniform, walking with too much confidence for his liking. Something about it makes him uncomfortable. Simmons has been on the force for 7 years, patrolling this suburban neighborhood like it's his own personal domain. His record is clean, at least on paper. But anyone who's lived here long enough knows his pattern. He doesn't trust people who look like her. Regina barely acknowledges him as she moves toward the register. She reaches into her pocket, pulling out her wallet, and that's all it takes. Simmons stiffens. His pulse quickens. His mind doesn't register what's really happening, only what he thinks is happening. His hand drops to his gun. The weight of it is familiar, comforting, a reflex before logic. The moment stretches. Time slows. Regina is just a few feet away now, focused on pulling out a few bills to pay. She doesn't notice Simmons's stare, the way his fingers curl around the grip of his firearm, the way his breath comes short, faster, until, freeze. Hands where I can see them. The command shatters the quiet. The cashier gasps. A woman near the snack aisle lets out a startled yelp. A man grabbing beer from the fridge whips his head around, eyes wide, but Simmons isn't looking at them. His gun is raised, pointed straight at Regina, and that's when everything changes for a split second. No one moves. The air in the small store turns heavy, thick with shock. The cashier's hand trembles as she grips the edge of the counter. A mother clutching a bag of chips instinctively pulls her young son behind her. A teenager near the refrigerated section slowly reaches for his phone. Regina doesn't flinch. Her training kicks in instantly, years spent leading troops, making split-second decisions in high-pressure situations. But this is different. This isn't a battlefield. This is home. And yet here she is, facing an armed officer in her own country. Simmons's stance is tense, his finger hovering too close to the trigger, his chest rising and falling in quick bursts. His body is wound tight with misplaced fear. I said, "Put your hands where I can see them." His voice is sharp, but there's something beneath it. Uncertainty. Regina exhales, slow and measured, keeping her hands visible. She tilts her head slightly, studying him, assessing the threat. This man, this cop, isn't just reacting to her movements. He was looking for a reason, and now he's found one. Her voice is steady when she speaks, controlled, unshaken. "You're pointing a weapon at a United States Army general, officer." The words land like a brick. The shift in the room is palpable. The weight of the moment presses down on him. Regina doesn't move, doesn't blink. Then, slowly, she takes a single step forward, just one, enough to make Simmons's grip falter for the first time, and that's when she speaks again. Lower this time, but sharper. "I've spent my life defending this country, including you. And this is how you treat me." Her words cut through the silence like a blade. The mother in the snack aisle shakes her head, muttering something under her breath. The cashier looks like she wants to sink into the floor, and Simmons, his breathing has changed. Shallow, uneven. He doesn't answer. He can't, because for the first time, he's realizing what he's done, but realization and regret don't change the fact that a gun is still pointed at an innocent woman. And right now, it's the shift in the room, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Regina doesn't move, doesn't blink. Then, slowly, she takes a single step forward, just one. Enough to make Simmons's grip falter for the first time, and that's when she speaks again. Lower this time, but sharper. I've spent my life defending this country, including you, and this is how you treat me. Her words cut through the silence like a blade. The mother in the snack aisle shakes her head, muttering something under her breath. The cashier looks like she wants to sink into the floor. And Simmons, his breathing has changed. Shallow, uneven. He doesn't answer. He can't, because for the first time, he's realizing what he's done, but realization and regret don't change the fact that a gun is still pointed at an innocent woman. And right now, that gun is the only thing standing between him and complete humiliation. But the longer it stays up, the worse it gets. The pressure is mounting. Something has to give. For the first time since Simmons pulled his gun, his hands start to shake. It's barely noticeable at first, just a slight tremor in his grip. But Regina sees it. She sees everything. Her eyes don't leave his. Not for a second. She's seen this look before. In young recruits on their first deployment. Standing in the heat of the desert. Clutching their rifles like a lifeline. Fear masked as aggression, but Simmons, he's not in a war zone. And yet his body is reacting like he is. The weight of the gun in his hand suddenly feels heavier. The eyes on him, the customers, the cashier, the phones, they're all waiting to see what he does next, and that's when it happens. Regina takes another step forward. Just enough to close the space between them. Just enough to make Simmons's pulse hammer in his ears. His mouth is dry. His mind is screaming at him to act. But act how? His brain races through scenarios, all of them bad. If he fires, his life is over. If he backs down, his pride is shattered. If he admits he's wrong, he isn't even sure if he knows how the phone cameras are still rolling. The red recording lights, like little beacons of truth. He can already see it. The headlines, the public outrage, the investigations. The videos will spread like wildfire. There won't be an officer's version of events because the evidence is right there. In front of him, Regina doesn't have to do anything. The world is already watching. She keeps her voice level. Controlled. I could have been anyone. Officer. Someone's daughter. Someone's mother. A woman just trying to buy a bottle of water. And you didn't even hesitate. Simmons's jaw tightens. He feels like he's suffocating. He wants to say something, anything. But what could he possibly say? Regina tilts her head slightly, her voice dropping to something even sharper. Tell me, officer, what exactly did you see? It's a simple question. But there's no good answer. Did he see a threat? A suspect? A reason to draw his gun? Or did he see what he wanted to see? His throat closes up. His grip on the gun wavers. The silence in the store is suffocating now. Everyone is waiting for him to admit what they already know, and Simmons, he finally sees it too. The truth is staring him in the face, wrapped in a military uniform that demands more respect than he could ever give. His pride wants to fight, wants to cling to the illusion that he was justified, but the truth is louder than his ego, and the worst part. He knows it's too late, but pride is a funny thing. Because even knowing he's wrong, Simmons still hasn't lowered his gun. Not yet, and everyone in the store is waiting to see what he does next. The longer Simmons keeps that gun raised, the worse it gets. The cashier grips the edge of the counter so tightly. Her knuckles have gone white. A woman near the entrance inches toward the door, eyes darting between Regina and Simmons like she's bracing for the worst, but the cameras, they don't move. Every single phone is still recording, locked on Simmons's trembling hands. And he knows it. He can feel the weight of their judgment pressing down on him. The silent condemnation in every pair of eyes that stare back at him, but he doesn't lower his gun, not yet, because if he does, then he has to face the truth, and the truth is ugly. Regina hasn't moved except to tilt her head slightly. Like she's studying him, dissecting him, waiting to see if there's anything worth saving. She's still calm, still in control, but now, she's pressing him. What exactly did you see, officer? Simmons's jaw clenches. He wants to say she was reaching for something, that she made a sudden movement, that he had a reason, a justification, but the words won't come. Words haven't even fully formed in his mind. But he knows they're a lie. The store is dead silent, the tension thick enough to choke on. Then, a voice from the back, "Man, put the gun down. We all saw what happened." It's the teenager. His phone still raised, the camera capturing every single moment of Simmons unraveling. A murmur ripples through the store. The mother with her son shakes her head, disgusted. The older man near the beer section mutters, "This is some damn shameful stuff." Simmons feels his stomach drop. They're turning on him. No, they already have. And when the public turns, there's no coming back. His heart slams against his ribs. His grip on the gun weakens, not because of regret, but because of fear, not of Regina, not of the people in the store, but of what happens after, the news, the investigation, the way his name will be dragged across every screen in America. His voice is dry, barely a whisper. But he doesn't know what to say. Regina watches him struggle, for words, for justification, for a way out. There isn't one, and she knows it, but she doesn't let him off easy. Instead, she takes another step forward, closing the space between them. She could tear him apart right now, humiliate him in front of the world, make sure he never wears that badge again. But she doesn't. Because she doesn't need to. Simmons is already unraveling all on his own. The weight of the moment suffocates him. The cashier still hasn't moved. The customers are still recording. And Regina, she never once looked afraid. Because fear, that's his burden to carry. And now he has to decide. Does he double down? Or does he do the one thing he's never done before? Face the truth. Simmons can barely hear anything over the pounding in his chest. The gun in his hands feels wrong now. Heavy, like it doesn't belong there. Like maybe it never should have. And everyone is still watching, the phone cameras, the customers, the cashier, but it's Regina who never looks away. She stands there, visible, still as a statue, not because she's afraid, because she's in control. And Simmons, he's lost every bit of control. He thought he had. His hands tremble harder. He can't breathe right. His fingers feel numb. He swallows, but his throat feels like sandpaper. And suddenly, it's too much. The weight of his own stupidity, his recklessness, his failure, it all comes crashing down. He finally lowers the gun. Slowly, like he's just now realizing what he's done. Like he's waking up from a nightmare he created. The tension in the store shatters all at once. The cashier lets out a shaky breath. A woman near the register mutters, "About damn time." But Simmons, he still doesn't know what to do. His mouth opens, searching for words, something, anything to fix this, but there's nothing left to say. Because the damage is already done. He looks at Regina like he wants her to save him. Like maybe if she tells him it's okay, it won't be as bad as he knows it's about to be. But she doesn't. Instead, she leans in, just enough that only he can hear. Her voice calm, even. "I could have been dead right now. Because of you." Simmons blinks hard. Because for all his years in uniform, all the stops he's made, all the times he's pulled someone over or demanded ID or reached for his gun first, no one has ever said it to him like that. So simple, so direct, so undeniably true. He wants to argue, wants to say he thought she was a threat, that she moved too fast, that it wasn't about her uniform, her face, her skin, but he can't, because it was, and everyone knows it. The truth is already in the air, thick and suffocating. And the cameras, they caught it all. The shift in the store is loud. Even though no one is speaking. The respect he once thought he had, gone. The authority he thought he carried, gone. And Regina, she just steps back. Doesn't gloat. Doesn't raise her voice. Because she doesn't have to. Simmons has already destroyed himself, and now there's no coming back. Simmons stands there, gun at his side, shoulders heavy with something he's never felt before, genuine, soul-crushing regret. But it doesn't matter now. Because it's too late. The store is still silent, except for the quiet ding of the automatic door opening. 2 police officers step inside. One of them, Sergeant Lewis, locks eyes with Simmons. His gaze flickers to the still raised phones. Then to Regina, standing tall in her military uniform. He already knows, and Simmons, he sees it too. The end of everything. Lewis approaches. Slow, measured. No one speaks. Simmons' throat tightens as the inevitable words finally come. Hand over your weapon. His fingers twitch. Instinct telling him to resist. But what's left to fight for? With a stiff breath, Simmons unclips the holster, removes his gun, and places it in Lewis's outstretched hand. No sudden movements, no more mistakes, just defeat. The second officer steps forward, motioning toward the door. Come on, Brad, not Officer Simmons. Not sir, just Brad. Because whatever authority he had, it's gone now. As they lead him out, he catches one last glimpse of Regina. She doesn't say anything, doesn't smirk, doesn't gloat, doesn't even look satisfied. Because this was never about revenge. This was about something bigger. And Simmons, he's just another lesson learned too late. Outside the store, a crowd has already gathered. News vans, more officers, bystanders murmuring, shaking their heads. His name is already being whispered. In just a few hours, it'll be everywhere. The headlines will tell the story. The videos will go viral. The department will hold a press conference. His past complaints, the ones that never went anywhere, will resurface. And whatever future he thought he had, it just ended back inside. Regina exhales, shaking her head. She isn't angry. She isn't even surprised. Just tired. She takes her time walking to the register, pulling out the cash she was reaching for before a gun was pointed at her chest. The cashier stares at her, eyes still wide. I'm so sorry that happened to you, they say. Regina offers a small, knowing smile. It's not the first time, and somehow, that's the saddest part. She grabs her water, her protein bar, and walks out, unshaken, unchanged, untouched. Because this wasn't just about her. This was about every person like her who never got this ending, and maybe this moment just saved someone else. We tell ourselves stories about justice, about fairness, about who wears the badge and who wears the uniform, but reality, it doesn't always match the story. Simmons thought he had power, thought his uniform made him untouchable. But power without accountability always collapses. And the truth always comes out. If this moment teaches anything, it's this: when the time comes to choose between fear and fairness, between bias and truth, between pulling the trigger and stopping to think, choose right, because some mistakes you don't come back from.